So once again, we're honored to have a guest visit us here at the Woodland Escape, and I'd like to introduce Brandon Figueroa. And yeah, we've had some fascinating people here, and this young fellow, well, he's an educator, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's let's see if I got this right because we had a wonderful campfire last night. So Brandon has spent 2 years in England, from England to Thailand for two
Yeah,
years, from
yeah.
Thailand to Australia for 2 years, then to a small island in the Bay of Fundy in a
Yeah,
single room
that's right.
schoolhouse.
All the grades, K to 5,
There you go, all at once.
all at once.
And then from there, he spent the last 2 years near James Bay in northern Quebec on a Cree reservation, educating up there. And anyway, we spent a campfire last night, and like I often talk, give my little wee bits of history. But today, because we thrashed this out last night, we're going to get into it. But we're going to take out a huge bite out of history today. It's not going to wee bit. We're going to sort of look at where our discussion evolved around where colonization of the world actually started. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Brandon, and let's go way back over there
Okay,
to.
we're going to have to go way back before the fur trade and all of the exploration, to the motivation of why they started moving the way they did. And that takes us all the way back to 1453, in Constantinople, what is today called Istanbul. That's in modern day Turkey. And that city, what was then called Constantinople, was held by the Christian nations of Europe. And then in the 1450s, the Muslim nations came and conquered it through a siege, and it fell in May 29th, 1453.
So we're actually able, and here's where our discussion went last night. We're taking that date
Mm-hmm.
as the start of a European dominance, colonization of the world, and we often think about the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock and Jamestown, and we think of Champlain establishing Port
And
Royal
Cartier.
in Cartier, and all those people. We go, that's the start of it, but we're actually going back, not 1500s. We're going back a good spell before that.
Yeah,
And
because when the Muslim nations came up and took Constantinople, there were limitations in trade, and there was a problem for the European nations moving east into Asia. So all the kings and all the lords of Europe needed to find a new way to get to India and China. So they said, we need to start building ships and investing in technology and going west, because they had figured out that it was round and you could go the other way, which is why they started sailing west, and they got to Florida area, and they thought they were in India. And
mm,
that's why they called them Indians, because
Indians,
they
yeah,
didn't know. They said, "Oh, we've arrived, we made it," and they were like, "Oh, this. I don't know if this is the place."
yeah,
And they
yeah.
said, "Oh no, it's the place. These are Indians. Look at them, they're Indians." And now we know that they were incorrect at the time, but it was that battle in that 1 month or 2 months of siege where that day changed the whole course of history, and we had to go west, and eventually they found what they found. They found the resources of this area, and then they found they could exploit those resources,
And exploit they did.
and exploit they did.
We
And
think of that. I mean, the fur trade, if we think about it, and the tobacco industry, which was basically the currency of the American colonies, was just a byproduct of them. Because as we talked last night, we'd sort of Europeans had outgrown Europe.
Mhm. Yeah.
Population-wise, they were running out of food, and that's why they needed this access through Istanbul.
Yes, and they called up Champlain and Cartier also, because they were both, and they were very far distance apart in time, but they were both fishermen who had gone back and forth to the kind of Newfoundland area.
Mhm.
So they knew the way, and they knew there was food.
A little off topic,
Yeah.
but I find it interesting how a moment like the battle we're talking about changes history. But Champlain, like you said, a master cartographer, he's mapped the eastern seaboard almost down to Florida, and he decides on Port Royal in the Bay of Fundy as a place to establish New France.
Hmm.
Uh, and I often wonder, well, what if he decided on the Chesapeake Bay area?
Yeah.
How different history might might look today.
And if you think back to the battle, what would happen if that battle in Istanbul or Constantinople at the time, what if that went differently? What if there was something wrong? Some guy didn't show up to work. The weather was different. Any number of things. The wind. It could have been the wind. It could have been anything that changed that battle. And if the Christian nations of Europe maintained control over Constantinople, it's hard to think about what it would be like today.
Yeah,
Like, would the Europeans have come? Would they have come with such economic ambition as opposed to just kind of fishing here for a while and
Right.
continuing to trade with the East and China and India and get the spices and the silk and goats and stuff?
I've often mentioned when I do my wee bits of history, I often find it has much more impact for me personally if I can actually be on the site. For example, recently I stood in the Cumberland Gap where Daniel Boone takes the company, Transylvania Company, through into Kentucky. And it has a lot more impact, but you've been to Constantinople.
Yes.
You've actually stood on the wall.
Yes, in my journey, among my world travels, when I was living in England, I did go to Turkey, and I went to what is today Constantinople, and you can see this wall because this city is so important to trade and travel. If you have an army in Europe and you want to get it to Asia, you must go through Constantinople.
only way.
It's the only way.
The gateway.
It's the gateway. And if you want to take an army from Asia, exact same thing. You must go through this land bridge in Turkey. So I did go, and it is an ancient city, and it has got this huge wall all the way around it. And because it's been conquered so many times, you can see the different style of brick. So the bottom of the wall has a certain type of brick from a certain empire, and then that wall was knocked down and rebuilt by the conquerors, and so then you can see a Roman brick, and then it was conquered again, and the wall was, damaged and rebuilt again with a different kind of brick. So when you go, it's quite the sight to see this wall, which is a hodgepodge of all these different kinds of bricks, and it just gives you the history. Just by standing next to the wall, you can see 1,000 years of history in this brickwork, and it's incredible. And
Fascinating.
it's so old, and it's amazing.
So speaking of walls, you've come to help, I understand.
Yes, I come in the name of service.
Well, I got some walls to build.
Okay, good.
You've been following, so you know we're in the process of building our fort. So we've had a good breakfast. Was it
Great
okay?
breakfast, delicious.
So I think we fortified ourselves for the fatigue of fabricating a fort. How's that?
Yes, exactly.
And this isn't Holiday Ranch, so I think we better get at it. Enough lollygag.
Better get to work. I got to earn my breakfast.
There you go.
Let's go.